of Virginia trying to make up at least a $2 billion shortfall. That figure and other figures that I'm going to present tonight continue to be moving targets. But I would doubt that they're going to get less. It's going to be more. In January, state sales tax and state revenues were off 6%. I don't know what the state budget is exactly, but just take 6% of $2 billion, and you can see how bad the state economy continues to slide. That's the challenge in front of lawmakers in Richmond right now, and again, all that trickles down to us. Governor Kane, before he left office, he proposed a caboose budget. That budget is now in front of the General Assembly. That budget contains $514,842 worth of reductions for Caroline County. That is the budget that we are building this budget proposal on. Should that improve, then things will improve. But we cannot take a chance that it will. And the caboose budget also joins with Governor McDonald's budget, in which the General Assembly is considering right now. Governor McDonald just made his proposals just a few days ago. And I think everyone has seen what those are. Serious cuts in education, health, and other factors in trying, and as he tries to have a balanced budget. When we talk about other things that will get worse or are projected to get worse, recreation taxes in Caroline County, which we all know is tied to new homes being titled, new homes being permitted. We estimate those to be down 42% from the budget this year. That's approximately $140,000. Going back to the caboose budget, reductions in reimbursements from the Comp Board for constitutional offices, $415,586. That would include proposals in which the county would have to pick up all the employees in the Office of the Commissioner of Revenue and the Office of the Treasurer, because the state will no longer fund those positions. Reductions in grant reimbursements. We expect to lose $83,135 there. Electoral Board, although a modest amount of $8,000, I put this up there because it just tells you that they are hitting all cylinders when it comes to the local services to our county. And the Electoral Board will also get hit. Services to DMV, that the Commissioner of Revenue has always gotten this information free of charge. All we had to do was go in line and get it. Now we have to pay for it. Again, another nickel and dime expense, but still, it's an expense that the state is passing down to the local level. And the final bullet on this page is discussions or that reductions could be even worse than what I'm even presenting to you right now, because the General Assembly is not completed or has not completed its work. Mr. Chairman, we're also dealing with the now and the then. The now reality is that as Finance Director Ms. Hatcher presented just a few weeks ago, Caroline County is running a $300,000 shortfall between present and what we anticipate to come in as of June the 30th. And a lot of that is tied to the caboose budget. And last year, I remind everyone, the county government, we feel, did our part in trying to just get to the point we are now with this budget. We reduced budgets 15% last year. Public education obviously couldn't do that much. They did their share. We filled only necessary positions, what we considered to be critical to the operations of the county. We froze others, we combined others. We restructured our capital program, which you get a monthly update on now. And you yourselves told us that we need to turn some of these projects back in and put them off to a later time. Employees in county government took 6 furlough days. The only thing I challenge all other agencies to say, did they take any furlough days or did they reduce their salaries? County government did. And we did it to the tune of 6 furlough days. And we also downsized our employee base by 6 positions. Now, Mr. Chairman, if we had a fund balance, a rainy day fund, being able to weather a storm, it would certainly have helped us through the last 2 or 3 years. But the reality is, from 2000 to 2004, through your prudent leadership and through, I believe, some good financial management on behalf of the administration, we were able to build a very solid fund balance that would have covered any storm that we're facing today. Unfortunately, the projections that we made in the housing industry did not come to fruition. But we still had responsibilities that we had to meet, particularly in the area of public utilities. We still had to upgrade a wastewater plant a few years ago. We still had to make an interconnection of 3 districts in our county to combine it into one. We still had to upgrade our lines. We still had to do what is necessary to do for a growing utility system. So as a result, at the end of the day, the general fund loaned the utility fund $5 million. And we're all hopeful that someday that utility fund will pay that money back to the general fund. But as we stand today, the fund balance has not recovered from that. And thus, we're running a very thin line when it comes to annual revenues operating within the general fund. There's a lot always discussed about the county's debt and whether we have too much debt. I remind everyone that any progressive locality in this United States of America has debt. You cannot operate government without having debt. Buildings wear out. Schools wear out. You're forced at times to upgrade judicial services like courthouses. You have to be progressive in your growth areas and install public utilities where you think it's going to drive business and industry, as well as your residential growth. That's what this county has done over the last several years. And thus, the general debt that you see in front of you is where you are. 27-odd million in the general fund, 33-odd million in public schools. We just added a new one online 2 years ago with Lewis and Clark. Over $20 million of debt. And that account has just now been settled in the last couple weeks. The utility fund, over $20 million in debt. The new wastewater plant down in Dawn, which I remind everybody helped us to become an All-America City recipient and help the quality of life of people who have never had that before, we still have to pay it. And then we have, over the last year, borrowed to meet expenses until our taxes and the critical tax collections in the critical times of the year come in. And that's a revenue anticipation note that we have to pay back midway through this year. So this budget pays back $6,646,000 in debt retirement. Keep that in mind when we're talking about the services that we're trying to provide. Many that you've heard tonight that are critical. But you have to pay the things that you have to do to go forward in county government. Now, our revenue picture is very uncertain right now as a county. Well, I've talked to you a minute about the state. Now let's look at the county. We project next year that collection of permits, that's housing, different fees and various licenses will be down $190,000. Revenue from the use of money and property will be reduced to $85,000. Recovered costs will be down $185,000. It's not a time, gentlemen. It'd be easy for me as county administrator to put you and this county in a bad situation and say, well, you know, let's just raise taxes. For every penny that I would push out there, it would be $315,000 in which you could get some easy money to try to fill these holes. But I just told you about the unemployment rate in this county. I just told you about the social services issues that are facing many of our people. I've just told you about the different challenges that people have. I cannot in good conscience ask you to raise the property tax rate at this given time. I just cannot do that. So I am proposing in this budget that the tax rate be the same, 53 cents, as it is right now. Now, there is a reassessment that's going on. That will determine property values over the next year that will go on the rolls January the 1st. Unfortunately for us at this point in time, we have to pay for that service, and that's another $200,000 one-time expenditure that goes in the budget next year. Fortunately, if I'm staying in here next year and giving this same proposal, that will be one thing that will be out of next year's budget. What is also put into this year's budget, it's a wish, it's a want, it's a desire, and it's a plea. I will ask the Board of Supervisors to at least equalize the tax rate in line with what the property reappraisal comes in. As you know, in next year's budget, I have to propose you have a quarter of, or 6 months of the budget that moves forward into the following year. I'm asking you now to consider at least equalizing that rate for next year. Give some consideration. If you don't choose to do that, and property values are as low as some may estimate, then we will really be trying to make up additional revenue next year. But that is not a decision you need to make now, but it will be a decision you'll have to consider next year. Some good news, and we wish we had more of these. Dominion Power added a new turbine project to the county. That's brought in an additional $600,000 in public corporation taxes that I can add to next year's budget. Unfortunately, there's not enough of those. There's not enough of those to make up some of the issues that we face. There's also in this budget a 5% increase in the user rates for all public utility customers. That would generate $320,000 for the utility fund. This is in line with the schedule that was put forth by our financial advisor and approved by the Board of Supervisors, that we would continue to steadily monitor and look at rates over the years, rather than jumping on it 3 or 4 years of a delay and have to have increases 20, 30, maybe even 40%. This is a gradual 5% increase to the utility customers. And in this budget, the utility debt will continue to be paid by the general fund, but capital debt or the operations of the utility fund will be self-sufficient, but utility debt still will be paid by the general fund. Now, let me talk to you a minute about fixed costs. You just saw one just a moment ago, $121,000 in insurance for our employees. We are forced to pick up contributions to retirement and life insurance at an increase of $165,000. And I also remind you that we've picked up more buildings. So more buildings means more utilities. It means more maintenance costs, and it means just general expenses to run our house, our government house. So that's where there's increases in fixed costs to general property. Here's one that's staggering. I've included increases in this budget of $217,605 to our regional correctional institutions. That is still $100,000 less than what they requested. And that's because expenses there have gone up and state revenue has gone down to serve those institutions. And again, it's a cost that the county is being asked to bear. $217,605 of new money is going into correctional institutions for adults and for juvenile facilities services. Now, how do we deal with all this? I'm proposing to you some reductions that will meet revenue shortfalls. I am asking the board to decrease personnel costs through attrition, reductions in force, and across-the-board salary reductions. This would save the board $995,000. This includes a reduction of 14 full-time positions. Across-the-board salary reductions would include 1% for those employees making $40,000 or less, and 2% for those employees making over $40,000. Other reductions would include cuts to contributions to outside agencies, which would save us $57,500. We're forced to eliminate the summer jobs program, which this year was only $10,000, but it still put some kids to work. I'm asking again that you close the cannery on a permanent basis. I know you have a proposal pending on what the cost is going to be to maintain that facility for the long term. The interest that we see as an administration does not merit putting any money into that facility. And we are also asking that further reductions to contributions to the county health department, which would give us a $27,000 savings. We are also asking you to reduce hours at certain solid waste convenience sites. Just like in fire and rescue, where you give the most money to the companies that are running the most calls, we feel like we need to shift our funds to those facilities that are serving the most people. And if we restructure some of our sites, change some of our hours, maybe even deal differently in the daily operation, we could save as much as $95,000 in doing that. We've revamped our capital program immensely, but there are certain things you just can't do without. We need to fund a knuckle boom truck. That's $60,000. We need to repair a fire engine for the Port Royal area. That's $60,000. We need to put a new roof on the Public Works building, which was the old Economic Development building. That's $13,000. And then we just discussed Victory Park. At the time of this writing, it was in the budget. You will determine whether it stays there or whether there'll be a combination of sharing of that responsibility with the town of Bowling Green. Now, your utility fund projects. We've included $462,500 to continue the Rappahannock River permitting. The interim water plan, we still need $554,000 to do that. And there's $2 million in this budget to consider the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant, in which a PPEA proposal is upon you, and you will make decisions after March the 1st on how we're going to move forward with that. And utility equipment that's necessary to continue to do what we do in the utility area at $140,000. This budget does bring to light the efficiencies that are now in place in the fire and rescue area. In going to a strong chief form of leadership, this budget relieves the volunteer companies from using their own money to fund operations. For years, you've seen volunteers march and stand right where I'm standing here tonight and tell you we can't operate. We have to go out and sell this, and we have to go out and do that in order just to keep the electricity on and the calls running out of those stations. This budget no longer does that. It relieves them of those responsibilities. However, in doing that, some of the financial functions have been moved directly under the chief's supervision so that he can manage all the expenditures that are necessary for those companies to operate. And then the third important component, as I said earlier, funds are directed to companies who are answering the most calls. If we don't have people in place to move the equipment, then we need to shift the money to people and places that are moving the equipment. That's the challenge that Chief Lehman has. He's put that in place, and we'll continue to see that through over the next year. The summary of this budget looks like this. The overall budget is $89 million and change. That's a 4.3% increase over last year. The operating budget, 0.5%. And as you see, the general fund, $34 million, is 0.3% less than what it was in this budget this year. Education, the audience is here to advocate for public education. I'm an advocate for public education. I have 3 kids in this school system. Many of you have graduated kids through the school system. Nobody wants to see one single dime not go to public education. But in the decision in making what needs to be funded throughout this whole budget, education is a major component of it. It was necessary to fund the school system in this proposal at $10,900,000, which is $442,000 less than what they have in this year's budget. I remind everyone that the composite index that is sent down from the state requires the county to fund at least at a $10,600,000 level. So this budget continues to do that. And the school board will present its budget to the board at your March the 9th meeting. General fund transfers. Debt retirement, we just talked about. $1.8 million of that is coming out of the general fund. We're giving social services, $407,000 from the general fund. Just talked about the public school division. The Comprehensive Services Act. What a moving target that is. Every year you're forced to come back and ask to give more and more money. And Mr. Parton is preparing another proposal for you at a March meeting because we're short of what we have advocated already. And we're already $405,000 we're transferring to the general fund. And then the dedicated revenue from personal property tax is $1.5 million. This budget funds 173 full-time employees and 60 part-time employees, which would be a net of 13 fewer employees than in FY 2010, which we're in now. The reason it's 13 and not 14 is because we are proposing the establishment of a county attorney as an employee rather than a contracted service that exists today. This is something that the board has discussed over the years, and we'll be interested to hear the discussions further along as this budget process runs its course. In the area of public utilities, I mentioned that operations will continue to be self-supporting in this proposal. The county has also picked up another $20,000 a month by providing water to Lake Caroline, which was an increase of about $5,000 what we had estimated it would be. And then Governor McDonnell jumped right in and reopened the rest stops, the VDOT rest stops. That is another $62,000 a year to us that we was going to have to cut out of our budget before. So that's a big help. So, Mr. Chairman, as I conclude this, as I said earlier at the outset, the county is now realizing the financial nightmare of the state and the financial scenes. It's alive and well in Caroline County today. You know, the deep reductions that we're facing in revenue, I've offset by deep cuts in personnel and salary reductions. And I'm taking staffing back to near 2006, 2007 levels. And I remind people that when we do that, we're trying to maintain 2010 services with a 2006 and 2007 employee base. I also remind you that the General Assembly's actions will likely not make the financial conditions of our county any better, but they could very well make them worse. We have gotten some good news out of law enforcement. The sheriff deputies lobby have done a great job, and I hope that we had lobbies everywhere that could do that good a job. And it might mean more money may come back into public safety that we had anticipated we were going to lose, and as a result, that could change some of the impacts that I have presented to you tonight, at least in that area. But other constitutional offices, I don't see too much happening to improve the situation now. And as I mentioned earlier about our $300,000 shortfall, these budget proposals that I'm mentioning tonight that would normally go into effect July 1, we may need to move them up in order to make up for that $300,000 shortfall if aspects of the caboose budget, Governor McDonald's budget, and the General Assembly's input comes to fruition. We may have to react immediately after they adjourn sine die. I always want to thank the finance director. No one knows how hard it is unless you're a finance director in putting together one of these documents. Fran Hatcher's done a wonderful job in the short time that she's been our director of finance. I want to acknowledge her input into this. She's run numerous scenarios for me before we came up with this proposal that is before you tonight. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm open to any questions or comments that you might have. The public hearing on this budget is set for 7:30 p.m. Tuesday, March the 9th, which is your next Board of Supervisors meeting.
All right, Mr. Ashcraft, appreciate the time and effort that you guys have put into the report, and I'd certainly say that by no means this is probably not a surprise to any members on this board. And I think in the near future we're going to be really glued closely watching to see what's happening in Richmond, to see what comes out of General Assembly session, with hopes that maybe there are some things that they can do to see where the reliefs are that we need in local government with some of the mandates that we have, and the easing of some of the mandates that we have to try to ease some of our pain here. They have a tough job too, because they have the same unemployment rates in the state close to what we have here. So we share their pain. The board will be working with the budget. You know, I'm sure there's some tweaking that we're going to need to do. Again, what changes in Richmond may affect us one way or another, and there's going to be other decisions that still have to be made. And we'll be working on this process. We have to have it done in time by law. So I don't know, I don't think board members don't necessarily have questions at this time, I don't think, because it's pretty much hot off the press from the county administrator. But, you know, I would tell everyone, I think that in these times, you know, if nobody hasn't recognized it yet, you know, I know that we certainly have, and it's time that we all do our part. And it's going to be tough, but you can only write the checks for the amount of money that you have in your checkbook. And, you know, we're at the point now that, you know, we got to balance our budget. We don't have the luxury of making money in local government. So we'll say to everyone here, for whatever reason you're here on the budget and your concerns, we understand them. But we'll work hard to try to meet all the needs that we can meet with the amount of revenue that we have. Okay, Mr. Ashcraft, thank you again for your report. And that's pretty much it from the county administrator's report. Let's make it the lights back on. All right. Okay. All right, our next okay.
Mr. Chairman, One thing I failed to mention in my comments that I think is pertinent, and I say this only because there's been a lot said about processes. The Board of Supervisors provides the local share to the public school division. They fund by category, and the public school division then appropriates that money accordingly to the programs in which they decide is in the best interest of the school division. This board, although we've heard a lot about the governor's school tonight, and we should have, it's a very vital program, this board will not have any input into the decision of whether the governor's school is funded. The board will have input as to what level of funding they give the school division, and then the school division administration and the board will decide as to what programs they feel like should be funded based on state, federal, and local revenues that they receive. Just a point of clarification for that, because there is a sentiment among the citizens at times that this board is responsible for school board programs, responsible for school board personnel moves, responsible for school board operations of facilities. That is not true. This board is the funding agent for the education system of the county as well as all other public entities. So thank you for allowing me to clarify that, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate
that, Mr. Ashcraft. And the closing segment, the county administrator's report. All board members have been presented with the county administrator's reports in your packet. Any questions specifically on anything the county administrator on that? Okay, that leads us up to closing board comments. Closing comments, Ms. Popowitz?
I have no closing comment, thank you.
Mr. Akers? Mr. Seeley?
I just have one. I would really like, in support of the Port Royal and the EOD site, to see a draft resolution as soon as possible. If we could, if county staff could at least let Mr. Popowitz and I take a look at that, because I think there's some real benefit in having that early, even if it's not completely voted on by the board. I think it's a tool we need, and we need soon.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
About that? I guess we need a starting point, or we need what is it? The town's suggestion to us that right. You want to. Is that basically it?
There's some other things we need to add to that, and I've had discussions.
Can you work with
sure.
us to try to make sure we have
absolutely.
What you guys wanted to say, because I think that's been kind of the dilemma. We weren't really sure as to what to put in it. I know you had the town suggestion. Also, given the meetings that you've had individually with the colonel and some statements that have been made by him, but if it's all right, Mr. Chairman, then I'll just seek the input of the board, maybe run the drafts around, and then we can get a final document for the March 9th meeting. Does that work? Okay.
Works for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Thomas?
No, I didn't have any board comments. Thank you.
Okay. The chair has none as well. A motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made, proper second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting's adjourned.